Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at washingtech.com/book. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.
Moving the needle. Welcome to the Washingtech Policy Podcast.
Curating communications, media, and tech policy news so you don't have to. News, interviews, everything you need without the axe to grind. It's the Washingtech Policy Podcast with Joe Miller.
Additional earlier emails turn up from Hillary Clinton's private server. Netflix admits to throttling video, and Yondi Morris Andrews is my guest. The conservative watchdog group Judicial Watch has discovered some new emails from Hillary Clinton's private email server. It was assumed that Clinton had already turned over all the emails she was required to turn over to the State Department for proper record keeping. The Hill reports that Clinton had initially said she didn't use her personal email domain, clintonemail.com, prior to March of 2009. But the new emails that were uncovered show correspondence between Hillary Clinton and her then Chief of Staff Cheryl Mills from a month before, February of 2009. So this is raising new questions about the actual scope of emails that Clinton sent from her private email address. There was also some correspondence between Clinton and the disgraced retired General David Petraeus prior to when Clinton took office as Secretary of State from an account people familiar with the matter say was transferred to clintonemail.com. Julian Haddam has more at the Hill. Netflix has admitted to throttling some video traffic. The company says it's not your wireless carrier that's been giving you that degraded video quality over the last 5 years. It's actually Netflix. The video streaming service says it's throttling traffic to help customers avoid hitting their data caps. The company said it will be rolling out a data saver feature going forward, which will give viewers the option to decide whether they want to degrade their video or not. But does this violate the net neutrality rules? Matt Wood at Free Press says no, since the rule regulates the carriers, not the content providers, but he still expresses concern that Netflix didn't let its customers know what it was doing. Stephen Musil at CNET has more. The U.S. Supreme Court has agreed to hear Apple and Samsung's patent dispute. The dispute has to do with how much in damages Apple should be entitled to if Samsung infringed only a portion of Apple's iPhone design patent. This will be the first time in 120 years since the Supreme Court has heard a design patent case. The last one had to do with design patents that covered a spoon handle and a rug. In this case, the lower federal courts ruled that Apple was entitled to all of Samsung's profits earned through the sale of phones the jury found infringed the iPhone patent. Samsung appealed, saying the lower courts erred by instructing the jury that Apple is entitled to the full profits Samsung earned through the sale of its phones, or $548 million, which Samsung has already paid Apple. The courts awarded the full profits even though the patent only covers a component of the phone. So Samsung wants to knock those damages down from $548 to $149 million. Lawrence Hurley and Andrew Chung have more coverage over at Reuters. Brody Mullins and Carol Lee at the Wall Street Journal reported last week on the relationship between the White House and Google regarding Cuba. Google executive chairman Eric Schmidt had made a trip to Cuba back in 2014 to discuss building out Google Fiber to the country. When he returned to the U.S., he asked President Obama to lift the trade embargo on Cuba. Apparently, the White House was already engaged with discussions with Cuban officials, but it did not tell Google about it. But by the time the president did announce diplomatic relations would be restored in Cuba, Google had already established its presence there. You can find out more at the Wall Street Journal. A bipartisan encryption bill is now working its way through Congress. The long-awaited bill was introduced by Senators Richard Burr and Dianne Feinstein, the top Democrat and Republican on the Senate Intelligence Committee. The proposal does not include provisions for the particular type of technology devices must include to enable the government to gain access. Rather, it would require companies themselves to get into the phones. You can find out more from Reuters' Justin Volz and Mark Hosenball. U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch announced indictments last week in New York against 7 Iranians who apparently launched denial of service or DDoS attacks against the financial sector and other targets, including a dam in Rye, New York. However, The Verge suggests the indictments were made largely for political reasons because the DDoS attacks inflicted relatively minor damage and would probably not have resulted in indictments but for the fact that the attacks were carried out by individuals who were connected with the Iranian government. Russell Brandom at The Verge has more. Meanwhile, in the wake of last week's Brussels bombing that killed 31 victims and injured 300, Hillary Clinton addressed an audience at Stanford University and responded to calls by Ted Cruz to initiate patrols in Muslim neighborhoods and Donald Trump to initiate waterboarding and torture.
When other candidates talk about building walls around America, I want to ask them, how high does the wall have to be to keep the internet out?
Check out Carla Marinucci's full coverage at Politico. 2 groups linked to the hacker group Anonymous also claimed last week that they had launched a DDoS attack on NASA's network, but the site seemed to be functioning normally to visitors of the site. The hackers, however, showed proof that they had actually hacked into NASA's server. They provided the proof to mirror.co.uk, claiming that NASA is holding onto secrets regarding ISIS. NASA denied the attack. For more, you can check out Vijay Prabhu's post on Techworm. John Brodkin at Ars Technica reports that more than 50 advocacy groups, including the Electronic Frontier Foundation, Center for Media Justice, Free Press, MoveOn.org, and the New America Foundation, sent a letter to FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler yesterday asking the FCC to respond to zero rating plans ISPs and wireless carriers are now offering for some content services, such as Netflix and YouTube, or in the case of Comcast, only its own content, but not others. The letter also discussed the effect zero rating practices have on enabling wireless carriers and ISPs to pick winners and losers, an effect the net neutrality rules were designed to prevent. The net neutrality rules do not prohibit zero rating, rather they provide that the Commission will evaluate zero rating practices on a case-by-case basis. For a quick synopsis on zero rating, check out my interview with John Bergmeyer on episode 31, and that's at the 7-minute, 18-second mark. Finally, one of the federal trade commissioners, Julie Brill, a Democrat, will be stepping down. The FTC will now be down to only 3 commissioners, Chairwoman Edith Ramirez and Terrell McSweeney, also Democrats, and Maureen Alhausen, who is the agency's only Republican commissioner. Brill was a commissioner at the FTC for 6 years, and she'll be joining the law firm of Hogan Lovells to co-lead their global privacy and cybersecurity practice. Stay with us. For you, the listeners of the Washington Tech Policy Podcast, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. Why not listen at the gym, in the car, or on your morning run? How about Everybody Writes by Ann Handley? You can download Everybody Writes or another audiobook free by trying audible.com. Sign up for your free audiobook and 30-day trial today at washingtech.com/book. I'm proud to bring it back this week to our entrepreneurship series. We have a very inspiring guest today. Yondi K. Morris Andrews is a founding partner of Knight, Morris, and Reddick Law Group. She specializes in various practice areas, including corporate, entertainment, and real estate transactions. With her corporate clients, Yondi works mostly with startup companies, offering them advice on how to form as an entity while drafting and negotiating contracts on the company's behalf. Yondi offers creative solutions for her entrepreneur clients and is able to guide them as they grow from the startup phase to experienced businesses. She has been hired by her clients to act as general counsel, handling any needs that might arise from the day-to-day responsibilities of running a business. For her entertainment clients, Yondi drafts and reviews contracts, including licensing, agent, and artist agreements, and will negotiate deals on her clients' behalf. Yondi assists her clients, ranging from an independent playwright to a talent management company and whatever their legal needs might be. Another area of great interest to Yondi is real estate and representing clients in the buying and selling of both residential and commercial properties. Yondi works closely with clients and agents on her deals, and as a Chicago native, has insight regarding various neighborhoods and what her clients should consider when buying or selling their home. Yondi earned her BA from Spelman and JD from Northwestern School of Law. Please welcome Yondi Morris. Yondi, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
KMR Law Group and KMR Legal Staffing, the firms you co-founded, they have a very interesting story, but I'm going to let you tell it. It's no secret that the job market is tight for lawyers, brutal, particularly recent grads just starting out. Starting a firm is not only difficult, but scarier than working for someone else who's going to write that paycheck every week. But you went for it, and it wasn't so long after you graduated. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, as a lawyer myself, I'm inspired by that, and we haven't even done the interview yet. But in all seriousness, Yondi, let's give listeners some help. I know some of them aren't all that thrilled with their current work situation and want to move out of their current role as a lawyer, PhD, or congressional staffer working for someone else and set out and do their own thing. So let's give them that step-by-step guide. And, everyone's path is different, but there are some things that need to be done legally, irrespective of your marketing plan and approaches to reaching an audience. But before we dive in, when did that first light bulb go off, Yondi, and tell you that it was time to start your own firm?
Well, I grew up really wanting to be an entrepreneur. I had multiple businesses throughout elementary school, high school, and even law school. And so I knew that it was something that I wanted to do, but I wasn't really sure how I was going to do that as an attorney. And so when I graduated, I came out during a really tough economic climate. It was, right in the thick of the recession. And so I didn't really have a path for what my employment was going to look like. So I was a contract attorney, which means that I went into law firms and did projects for law firms when they essentially needed to outsource. And so I was working really hard. I was working many hours a week. And on one particular day, I was sitting in a meeting with a team of partners and associates who were working on a really big case. And so we were all there, theorizing and talking through the documents that we were reading. And at the conclusion of that meeting, one of the partners said to us, "Okay, slaves, get back to work." I was the only person of color in the room, and I was immediately.
Oh, wait a minute. Those were the exact words he used?
Oh, yeah. Those were the exact words. "Okay, slaves, get back to work." And I was looking around. I was trying to make eye contact with someone else. I thought certainly someone else understood that this comment was completely offensive, and not just to me as an African-American woman, but just to all of us as you're just worker bees and go slave, get back to work. And no one else looked surprised. Everyone just gathered their documents and walked out of the room. And it was in that moment where I said, okay, I'm done. I can't do this. I don't like this culture. I know that I'm, very smart. I know that I'm resourceful. I know that I can do something different than this. And so that night I took to Twitter as many millennials do. And I just vented and I said, I just need to start my own law firm. And those were words that I never knew would, create what we did. But in that moment, my current law partner, Kelly Knight, retweeted me and said, well, let's meet to discuss that. And, I didn't even know what that meant when I said it. And I said, well, I have another friend who's also a lawyer who is interested in this same kind of thing. How about the three of us get together? And Joe, just like that, we met at a Starbucks and we sketched out the logo that we currently use today and essentially had a meeting of the minds and drafted an informal business plan. And almost 4 years later, here we are.
It's funny you mentioned contract attorney work because when I was laid off back in 2014, I decided that I no longer wanted to leave my career to the whims of an employer. So I went back to doing contract work because it gave me the flexibility that I needed to build my business that I wouldn't get working full time. And without it, this podcast would never have happened. So it's good to see someone running a staffing firm who's actually done the work and not just exploiting the fact that recent grads are coming out of law school with massive student loans. And so, as you said, these other firms have what they consider to be slave labor, basically a powerless labor force that they can treat however they want. So it's good to see you've been there and done that. But what was the biggest challenge you faced setting up your firm? A time you felt that urge to just quit at one point or another, and how did you overcome it?
Well, what's funny is that we all maintained our full-time jobs while trying to build this law firm. And so similarly to you, Joe, I was doing contract work. I continued to do that contract work for a year while we were in our planning stages. And so that can be really tough. You want to have work-life balance, but essentially I needed to come home from my full-time job and begin my other full-time job in the evenings, which was building the law firm. So there were definitely days where it just felt like, okay, I'm not seeing my friends anymore. I'm not resting that much anymore. And you kind of do say, maybe I just need to stop. But, when you commit to this and you say, no, I know that there's a bigger purpose out there for me. And I know that I can build something that's going to be really amazing. When you get down and out in those moments, it's important to check in with your circle, check in with your support network, and they really get you back on track. And so the good thing about having two law partners is that every so often, one of us would feel like, oh my gosh, I'm overwhelmed here. And the other two would say, take the night off. We got you. And so they would do what they needed to do in that moment and let me rest and vice versa. And so really being able to depend on other people in your life or your team that you're starting this business with is going to become clutch when you are in those moments of just like, I can't do it anymore.
So what about fear, Yondi? How does the risk factor of starting your own business compare to the risk of staying on and working for someone else for years and years? How safe really is working for somebody else compared to starting your own business in your view?
Well, what's interesting about that is after we spent a year planning, we felt really comfortable and confident in our decision, and we really believed in our law firm. And so when we went into the bank with our operating agreement and our tax ID number ready to open our business account, the banker said, oh my gosh, are you guys afraid? And we looked at each other and in that moment said, no, actually, we're not afraid. And so fear wasn't something that we could let really debilitate us. Fear is an important part of being an entrepreneur because it keeps you on your toes. It keeps you thinking through business development and it keeps you really innovative. But what's important about fear is managing it and understanding that it has its place. And so really, for us, it actually feels more stable to be self-employed than for many of those who are out in the working world. I've had quite a few friends, whether they are law firms or whether they are lawyers or teachers, actually get laid off while, I've had my own business. And so for me, the fear is never getting laid off. In fact, what drives us more is the harder we work and the more business development we work on, the more we're actually going to make financially and the more visibility we're going to create. And so at this point now, being 3.5 years in, we don't have those same fears over a steady paycheck as we did in the beginning. But what's really important is that when you have that fear, you use that to plan. And you plan so that failure is not really an option for you. And with the proper planning and the proper resources, you won't fail.
So now the moment everyone has been waiting for, Yondi, let's get that step-by-step guide for entrepreneurs looking to start their own business. What are the things they need to do to get set up and running?
So the first thing that we did, and the first thing that I would suggest any entrepreneur do, is meet with other people in your field. So we hear all the time about networking, and networking has almost become this cliche term, but it's so very important. And it is because there's no real reason to recreate the wheel. There are going to be people out there who are going to say, listen, I've done this before, and these are the steps that I took, or these are the people that I had to meet with. And so when we took our year to plan and to meet with people, what would happen is we'd have one meeting and someone would say, oh, you know what? You need to talk to my accountant. Let me set that meeting up. And then we'd meet with that accountant, and that accountant would say, I know another entrepreneur who is an attorney. Let me set that meeting up for you guys so that you guys can, find out their best practices. And so it became increasingly important for us to get to know people while we were setting up our empire, essentially. We wanted to meet as many people as we could. And we knew that would also help so that when we did officially launch, people would know who we are. They would have met us before. They would have seen us at networking events. So KMR wouldn't be these new people in the field. In fact, we would have been in the field for a year, just, gathering ideas and meeting with people. Also, when you have these types of meetings, you learn some very important information. So for instance, do you need office space? Well, if you're in the tech world, maybe they'd say, no, you don't need a big lease on an office space. We do everything from our computers. And so those are things that you need to hear along your path to begin to determine, what are your capital needs going to be? What type of office space do you need? And so you learn those things by being in the field and understanding people's challenges. The second most important thing I'd say is that we have a lot of clients that come to us who are entrepreneurs, and they usually come to us because something went wrong. And when I say that, I mean that there are lots of things that the internet can help you with. So you can Google, how to start a new business. And Google is a really good resource, especially in the beginning when you have very limited funds. But when you're using Google templates and getting advice online, there are going to be things that are likely going to be missed that are specific to your field or specific to what you want to do. And a lot of times people create businesses and they don't actually form a legal entity, which is really scary, because if you don't form a legal entity, it means that if something goes wrong, your personal assets are liable. So what we have a lot of our clients do who meet with us is we have them form a limited liability company. A limited liability company gives you protection so that in the event that something goes wrong and your company is sued, your personal assets are not to be attacked, but your company assets can be attacked. So hiring an attorney to figure out what is the right type of company for you to form is really important. And similarly, during that same time, you should really be meeting with an accountant, because an accountant will be able to talk to you about tax implications of your business. When you have an LLC, you're able to write off the expenses, the profits and the losses through your personal income taxes. And so, you're not going to suffer as much in at least in the beginning years when you're not really making much of a profit. You're not going to suffer that much with your taxes. In fact, you'll get some tax benefits. And so certainly meeting with an attorney and an accountant are very important. Similarly, when you're meeting with that attorney, they're going to help you get your legal documents in order. So if you have a limited liability company, you're going to want an operating agreement. An operating agreement essentially is a document that helps lay out the guidelines for how your business is going to run. Do you have partners? And if so, what are the finances look like? How much are people putting in? What happens if one person decides that they want to leave the business? How do you deal with that? Does your business just dissolve? What happens if someone does something totally negligent and puts your business at a very vulnerable state for a lawsuit? How do you deal with that? And so an operating agreement is very necessary in order to have a step-by-step plan for how your business is going to run. And in some states and at some banks, you have to have an operating agreement for a business account to even be opened. The next step I'd say is to make sure you open a business bank account. That's important for a few different reasons. First of all, you want to make sure that you're not commingling funds. So you don't want to have a business running and put business money into your own personal account. It just makes for a disastrous accounting situation. And it means that in the event that something goes wrong, again, you've commingled funds so people can come and try to attack your personal funds. And so you want to keep that business bank account separate. But what also happens is that when you have a business bank account, you are able to show some stability with your company. You're able to show money coming in, money coming out, which is going to become really important if ever you need to apply for a small business loan or if ever you need to have a line of credit. So establishing that business account, it really legitimizes you. It keeps your funds separate, and it helps to show, okay, I have some history here when it comes time to try to get a loan. The other thing that I would say is it's really important to meet with a marketing and branding team. Having someone help you design your website, having someone help you design a logo. Those things become important because if you want to have a small business, you want to be able to say, visit my website, and you want people to come on your website and see that you're legitimate. The last thing you want to do is have a website that's non-functional, or the domain name disappears because it's not being managed, or your site is being hacked. You don't want those things. And marketing is becoming increasingly important with setting yourself up from other people. In the same vein, if you do meet with the marketing team and you do have a logo, you're going to want to circle back to your attorney because you're going to want to trademark that logo. I got a call from a client the other day who said, oh my gosh, I just received a cease and desist order because I'm using a name and that name has been trademarked. Well, unfortunately for that business owner, she had been using her name and her logo for years, and now she's getting something that says, you have to stop. So she's struggling to figure out, my whole visibility is about my name and my logo. How do I just stop using that? Unfortunately, she's going to have to because she never trademarked any of her information. And when you don't do that, again, you make yourself vulnerable to people saying, look, you're stealing from me. This is some sort of infringement. I have that name already. So those are things that you really have to be aware of when starting a business. And if you're conducting business online, let's say you're selling t-shirts or something, you're going to want, terms and conditions. You're going to want a privacy agreement so that people understand what's happening with your website. So those are kind of some of the top things that I would suggest when starting a business to have in place so that you're protecting yourself and you're representing yourself properly, and you don't have to be concerned with violating any state laws or other businesses while running your business.
I can tell you that from my own personal experience, there's so many pitfalls that could happen if you don't talk to the right people. You see ads for things like LegalZoom, and those are fine, and I think they have lawyers on there already, but you need lawyers who understand your unique situation. And so, it's just critical to follow, first of all, these actionable steps. But if you get stuck, that there are folks out there who you can use as a resource. But Yondi, it's been an absolute privilege having you on the show and hearing this really powerful, actionable info from you to get people up and running. And so thanks again for joining me. I just want to ask you a few more questions and then we'll close. Sound like a plan?
That sounds good.
All right. On this podcast, we like to talk about policy and entrepreneurship, but also about what makes successful people like you tick. Tell us, Yondi, what are some habits, tactics, and apps that you use every day to stay on top of your game?
Well, one of the things that I do in terms of a habit is I've made it a habit to read a lot each day. I want to know what's happening around me. I want to know how to be the best entrepreneur that I can be. And there are so many great articles that come out via social media that really help me understand on a day-to-day, how do I run my business? So I'm on Twitter each day. I subscribe to certain people like Forbes, like entrepreneurship.com, just so that I can be on top of the cutting edge articles that are coming out about people just like me. And it's really important to have really good habits so that I can be my best person and I can utilize the hours of my day in a really meaningful, efficient way. In order to do that, one of the apps I use is Wunderlist, which is a to-do app. And it's really important for me to have a to-do list because so much happens throughout the day. And if I'm not tracking it, I don't necessarily know what needs to be done, what has been done already. And I'll tell you, being able to check things off my to-do list is a very empowering thing that helps me throughout the day because I know that I'm being proactive and I know that I'm being efficient. The other app that I use is called Breathe, and it's a meditation app. I have learned over the last few months that it's really important as an entrepreneur who's really busy to check in with myself and to make sure that I'm having a good day and to make sure that I'm balanced and eating well and healthy. And, being an entrepreneur can be really stressful and can really, cause you to come unraveled during, certain parts of the day. So just having an app that is a breathing tool that just helps me meditate is really, really helpful.
And tell us the name of one of those books you're reading right now, Yondi, that you're recommending to basically everyone you meet.
I am recommending Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. It's a really great book. It's a very inspiring tale. And one of the chapters is the commencement speech that she gave to Dartmouth called Ditch the Dream, Be a Doer, Not a Dreamer. And it's really an amazing push for people who are entrepreneurs who dream of things but don't necessarily know how to put it in practice. And so she gives some really great steps as to how you can stop just dreaming about it and actually do it.
Thanks again, Yondi, for joining me. And do you have any final ideas you'd like to leave with the audience before we close? And where can folks find you online?
I'd say the final idea is really just to trust yourself. If you think that you can take this leap of faith and you can do it and you can do it well, I would say go for it. You do have to be prepared to really work hard. But if you're willing to work hard and put in the time and energy, you'll be successful. So trust your gut. If you think that it's time that, to go out on your own, trust that you can do that. Build a great network for yourself and you'll be building a security blanket around you for the times that you doubt yourself. But just do it. Go for it. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at KMR Law Group and on Facebook, Knight Morris and Reddick Law Group.
And you've been listening to Yondi K. Morris Andrews. Yondi is a founding partner of Knight Morris and Reddick Law Group and KMR Legal Staffing. She specializes in various practice areas, including corporate, entertainment, and real estate transactions. With her corporate clients, Mrs. Morris Andrews works mostly with startup companies, offering them advice on how to form as an entity while drafting and negotiating contracts on the company's behalf. Yondi, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
That concludes episode 32 of the podcast. Thanks so much to all of you for listening. I cannot do any of this without you, so thank you. And if you like the show, do me a favor and head on over to iTunes and give it a rating and review. It doesn't take long, and you'll be in and out in 30 seconds. I can't tell you how important these ratings and reviews are, so thanks for that. Really, really appreciate it. And thanks again for listening. I will see you back here next week. Take care, folks.
Thanks for listening to the Washing Tech Policy Podcast. You've been briefed.